This is Lightning Power Lunch on the Lightning Audio Network with Dave Mishkin and Greg Linnelli.
I think a lot of it now is timing and reps with line mates and all those things that are hopefully get you ready for game one. Because there's when you have a whole group of guys, ice time gets munched up by other people, and so now it's we'll start to fine tune the group. Like I said, more reps, timing. That should be the big things that come in play.
It's the fun part right now. I think for us in preseason, as we get a little closer to the regular season, cuts are going to still be made. We've had a few over the weekend, and the Lightning take on their biggest rival coming up here starting tonight and into the next couple of games as well. What type of games do we see? Don't know, but it makes preseason a little more intriguing, knowing that there are some battles out there that need to be wrapped up before the season starts. And we're going to talk about it here for the next hour. We are taping before, because partner, as I bring in Dave Mishkin, Steve Ersnick's our producer, I'm Greg Linnelli. Game is in Orlando, so you got to fight that rush hour. You got to fight that I-4. That's tough.
We're all hoofing our way down or up I-4. So we're going a little bit earlier. The Lightning's lineup has been released. I actually just got the Panthers lineup too.
What can you tell
us? The Lightning are skating kind of right around the time that we are recording this. So if we get some information about line combos, we'll pass those along. But were you a Seinfeld fan when the show was on?
I'm watching the reruns now. That's how bad TV is for out there. I watch it.
I'm showing my age probably that I remember when it was actually on Thursday nights, and I would watch in syndication too. But I remember there was a bit where Jerry was talking about rooting for a team. He's like, the players change, so basically we're just rooting for laundry, right?
Right.
The uniform, and less so the Lightning than the Panthers, but I think definitely the Panthers. If Panther fans come to Orlando, they are kind of rooting for laundry tonight. Because
good point.
Other than Daniil Tarasov, who they brought in to back up Sergei Bobrovsky, I don't really see any player on this list tonight that you would say, I expect that they're going to be on the NHL roster. Now, I have not done a deep dive yet on their depth chart, and the Panthers have some injuries, certainly at forward. Tkachuk is out. Barkov's going to miss, at the very least, the regular season. They're going to need to obviously he's irreplaceable, but they're going to need a roster spot for him. And Tomáš Nosek is also injured. So they have some injuries at forward. So maybe one of these guys or more than one are in the mix. But, Tyler Mott, I mentioned him. He's playing. Noah Gregor. These are guys who have been in the NHL at least a bit. Not just Mott. Nolan Foote is in their organization, a former Lightning draft pick. He's playing tonight. Jack Studnicka scored for them. They won in overtime last night at home. He scored the overtime winner. He's in the lineup. Trevor Carrick, I think he's kind of been an up-and-down guy. He's a defenseman. This is going to require a little bit more of a heavy lift for me. You're like, wait a minute, who is that guy? Usually when we're in week 2, I'm like, oh, there's Bennett. There's Verhaeghe. There's Forsling. That may be later in the week. The Orlando game, certainly on the Florida side, it's a lot of guys who are going to be in the AHL, frankly speaking. On the Lightning side, they just don't have as many players left. I think the Panthers are still in the 50s for their roster. Now, part of that might be that they played last night and they played tonight. So maybe they're going to have more cuts after tonight, and then they have the 2 games left against the Lightning here in Tampa on Thursday and at Sunrise on Saturday. We'll see. You figure at some point they're going to give their regulars a game, right? Like they don't want to just go into the regular season with no games, I would think. So, the Bennetts, the Verhaeghes, the Forslings, the guys I mentioned, Nico Mikkola, Louis Storinen, Lundell, they're going to get in a game at some point. It's just not going to be tonight. Now for the Lightning,
and I texted you over if you want to look at the line combinations while you're going over the roster.
Great.
It's mainly, I think, a minor league. I should take that back. Guys who Your stars aren't necessarily in the lineup either.
Yeah,
for Tampa
you
Bay.
sent me the Lightning lines.
Yeah.
So what we can say about the Lightning's lineup is, so first of all, Scott Sabourin was put through waivers. I believe he cleared because I haven't heard otherwise. In fact, he had to have cleared because they called him back up. But once he's cleared waivers, they can send him down without having to send him through waivers again. So Sabourin is a guy who has a lot of penalty minutes in his pro career. I mean, it was not that long ago. Was it 23, 24 playing the AHL? He had 192 penalty minutes playing for San Jose.
That's
and last year playing for San Jose, this is the AHL team, he had 111 penalty minutes.
Yeah.
So we haven't really seen him drop the gloves, but I mean, you have him, you have Roman Schmidt in the lineup. In case things start to go off
I
the
like
rails.
to fight. Roman Schmidt, let's go. I like to fight.
I shared that with Brian yesterday when I saw him. He laughed again. So they brought Sabourin back up. I mean, yes, the Lightning still have some guys who are not practicing, notably Pontus Holmberg and Victor Hedman. Vasvilevskiy is expected to be at practice, full practice today, not with the game group. He's not making the trip to Orlando. So Sabourin is in. So the Lightning have added a player since we went down what the roster looks like for Monday's show. But no Point, no Kucherov, no Gensel, no McDonough, no Chernak, no Cirelli, no Hagel, no Gord. Like, none of these guys are making the trip. But, I mean, the Lightning only have so many other players. So we are seeing Bjorkstrand, both the goalies, Johansson and Halverson, who are left besides Vasilevsky, are going. We're seeing Moser, we're seeing Gonsalves, Lilleberg, Radish, Chafee, Geeky. But, I mean, a lot of the guys who are honestly kind of battling for these spots that we broke down on yesterday's show are in the lineup. The one exception is James. He is not playing tonight. But Peltier and Kachuk, who haven't played since the first couple of preseason games, are in. In fact, when I look at the lines that you sent, you sent them. Why don't you read them, Greg?
Let me pull it up. So, first line, Gonsalves, Geeky, Bjorkstrand. Duke, Finley, Peltier are your second line, essentially. Gergensons, Kachuk, Chafee would be your third. Sokoviak, and I always screw up his name. Abrisi.
And
Sabourin.
Abrisi is not a center. So the way that this was Eric, who I think had these listed, he didn't have the centers in the middle. Gergensons will be the center on that Gergensons, Kachuk, Chafee line. I think Stahoviak will be in the middle with Abrisi and Sabourin.
Correct.
Yeah.
And then it's Moser, Radish, Lilleberg, Crozier, Carlisle, and Schmidt. Johansson is your starter. Halverson is your backup.
Yeah. So I mean, you've got Gonsalves, Geeky, and Bjorkstrand as your quote-unquote top line, and that makes sense. And then you have a lot of the rest of the forward unit, maybe with the exception of Gergensons, are guys, and Chafee are guys who are battling it out for one of these last couple of forward roster spots. But it's basically going to be a game featuring guys who are slated, many of them who are slated to go to the AHL by the time the regular season begins.
Correct. You know, so the last couple of games, is that going to be different? Probably.
Yeah.
You know, and that would be kind of interesting, you know, especially when a guy like Hagel maybe is in the lineup if that's the route they go. So I do think this game is important though for some guys who are knocking on that door, because the way competition is shaping up, if you have a game where it goes sideways a little bit, that could be the difference between you starting maybe at the NHL with the Lightning and maybe starting out in Syracuse. And if somebody comes in and has a tremendous couple of games here, partner, and closes out the preseason in a very strong fashion, you know, maybe that is enough to grab the attention of the coaching staff and say, yeah, you know, you're going to be a guy that starts. Or for some of these guys, at least bump you up in the pecking order down in Syracuse as well. So maybe, you know, if you felt like you were a long shot to be called up to the big club, maybe you're one of the first or second call-ups now at this point.
And I would actually almost look at it from the other side of what you're saying, which is, how many of these guys are going to have an impactful game tonight. That will help them for sure.
Yeah. Yep.
But on some level, they've already had impactful games. So it's almost like, is anybody not going to have an impactful game? Like that would be damaging to your chances. If you just kind of have a vanilla game tonight, the likelihood, I think, of you surviving the next cuts would be low. I mean, it doesn't mean that you're not going to get recalled, as we said, down the road. But what you showed got you to week 2. You have to keep showing it. And that almost should be the standard, right?
Yeah.
So if any one of these, and then we keep mentioning the forwards, the D as well. I mean, you have D8 and D9 basically as Declan Carlisle and Roman Schmidt beyond the 7 that we've kind of projected as being in the NHL roster. But, you look at the forwards, pick a name. If that player just kind of has a non-impactful game, it doesn't even mean that they make an egregious mistake, but they have to earn it, right? They have to almost go above and beyond just okay. If they have an okay game tonight, I'm not sure that will help them advance their cause to making the opening night roster. But
yeah, that's fair.
I mean, it doesn't mean that if they go to Syracuse and play well in Syracuse, they won't get recalled at some point down the road. They've made it to week 2. They made an impression.
They have. I think we all can agree on that. And, also, too, it's been maybe a secondary story. I actually think the goaltending has held up really well. However you want to look at that when it comes to the pecking order in the organization. I mean, I think Johansson has been very, very good. I think Halverson's been good, which has been nice. I kind of floated that idea around about the depth a little bit there, but it's, so far. And it does look like, Vasi hopefully will be back at practice today, but it is nearing that return regardless. So I think those are some of the other ones I think that's been a pleasant surprise when it comes to the Lightning and the overall depth. It really is turning out to be a training camp and a preseason partner where I don't know if you identify as this year feels like a turnaround of where the organization is. Not necessarily with the star players, but restocking and finding players who can help you not only this year, but years to come. But it might be. Yeah. It might be one of those things where, I actually think the Lightning, I mean, John Cooper said it about having as much talent in this training camp that he can remember. I'm probably paraphrasing there, but
in recent years, yeah.
That's a pretty big step. And I think it's worth noting it's happening right now. So I'm still excited. We've talked about preseason and where do we stand when it comes to watching these games and calling these games. I think for the most part, preseason for the Lightning has been not as interesting just because they've been coming off up until a couple years ago. Obviously, they've been coming off some deep playoff runs. They've got their core group back. You pretty much know who you have. And you know that you maybe didn't have a ton of help coming through the minor league system. So it was kind of like, all right, these guys are coming up. I don't know if they're legitimately going to be tracking to be NHLers, but we do know you have the core group of players in place and that you're going to go as far as those guys lead you. Mm-hmm. And while I think that is still the case, I think for the first time in a while, we can look at this and say, you actually have some guys who can help you. And that's also exciting because, remember, the goal isn't to get into the playoffs, it's to advance. Right. And they've had some blips on the radar the last couple of years. Obviously, playing against the defending Stanley Cup champs sometimes will do that. But I think now we can start having some discussions that, I think for the first time, you actually have some depth that might be able to be the difference in a 7-game series or helps you in the regular season when maybe your team is slumping a little bit or you have some injuries, that you're not really losing a ton when you get these guys called up because they are contributing at a pretty high level. That part's exciting.
Yeah, and look, you said the goal is to advance in the playoffs. I mean, I do think that when you enter a regular season, the goal is to make the playoffs because not every team does make the playoffs. I mean, the Lightning have made the playoffs, 8 years in a row? Like, that is pretty remarkable in this day and age, and it's really been in the John Cooper era. Since he has been the head coach and had a full season, they've only missed the playoffs once, and they missed it by a single point in 2017. So that is still, I think, the initial goal. But if they make the playoffs and go on in the first round again, no one is going to be happy. So I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying. I just think that it's almost like one step at a time. Steve and I were at the all staff meeting. It's kind of like the kickoff meeting for the season. They have it every year. And one of the things that usually happens is Julian Breezebaugh does, a little bit of a Q&A for the employees. And John Cooper actually also came after practice, and Pat Maroon interviewed Coop because they were reminiscing about the bubble cup, because it was a day removed from the 5-year anniversary.
Sure.
And, kind of what you were saying, Coop was mentioning how impressive this camp has been. What I heard kind of from both of them, and we've kind of heard this already in the preseason, I'm just going to state it again because they both made it a point to mention this, especially Julian. He talked about the competitiveness of not just the games, but the players. The players have have come into the prospect showcase, into training camp, into the first week of preseason, a very, very high level of compete. And he said, I think that has actually helped our veterans. And then the veterans, can push the younger players. The other thing he said is that going out 3 years in a row in the first round, he's like, I can sense a hunger from our guys, how unsatisfied they were with how last season ended and now 3 years in a row. So that does go to what you were saying about kind of the goal, which is to certainly go deep in the playoffs. And if you're combining a high compete with hunger, that's not a bad thing. The other part about this year that is a little different, and Julian mentioned this, is they do have a little bit of cap room. So because they have a little bit of cap room, they are able to keep 23. And, it sounds like they're going to keep 23. I would expect that of the 23, 14 are going to be forwards and 7 are going to be defensemen. But you mentioned depth. It's not only that, competition is good from a depth standpoint, or if you have injuries, depth helps. But having somebody sitting who wants to get in the lineup provides internal competition at the NHL level, which the Lightning have missed that a little bit. I don't know that it has affected them adversely. They had a great regular season last year. And, as I just said, they made the playoffs 8 years in a row. But, I think that'll keep having 23 in the roster should keep everybody on their toes. That's kind of what I'm getting at. And they haven't had that luxury. Certainly last year, they didn't have the luxury of keeping 23 because they were so tight up against the cap. And they were limited in who the players were that they had on the NHL roster based on contracts and everything else, and who was on a one-way, and, what sending a player down to the minors might do to the cap hit. They did it with Connor Sherry, but, it's kind of why Max Crozier was blocked a little bit, right?
Yeah. So
in some kind of parallel universe last year where they had extra cap room, maybe Max Crozier, when he's healthy, is up and he's pushing the competition of the other defensemen. They will be in a different boat this year, and I think Julian likes that. Every GM wants to have cap space, right? So they have a little bit more this year, and I think we're going to look at the full roster of 23, at least at the start of the year, and see where things go from there.
I think that's all fair. And I think when you take a look at people questioning, I don't know if the Lightning have the toughness, or they need somebody like this, they need somebody like that. Give me the overall depth first. Give me the skill guys who are hard to play against, and that can come in a variety of ways, partner. I don't know if I need, the typical 6'3", 6'4" power forward who's going to drop the gloves, and that's the added element that this Lightning team doesn't have that they need. I think I just want to see quality NHL players come up and push guys when they can and be productive, because I think on the best teams, there's not a ton of drop-off, particularly when you're dealing with your third and fourth liners, that those guys are providing you enough push and hard to play against that it can elevate the team in a way that shows in a 7-game series. And I think we've seen that when the Lightning have been most effective. Vasi's been awesome. Their star players have been elite, but their third and fourth lines have been really good.
Yeah.
And I think that's the standard. And however you get there, whether it's size, whether it's just a lot of skill, a lot of speed, I think we just want to see guys who compete hard, to what you just said, but also can play, can finish a little bit, tilt the ice the other way, have a good shift after a goal. I think those are some of the things that I'm sure their coaching staff is looking at, we are looking at, and so far so good. It has to play out that way in an 82-game season, but I think the Lightning have put themselves in a position to potentially be really, really excellent in many ways. Do we wanted to get some questions, or did you have any other comments?
We didn't really get many yesterday because we pre-taped. I know we're pre-taping again today, but if we have any that we want to get to, particularly if they may become obsolete as we get farther removed from when they were asked.
Bolts fan Syracuse says, from last episode, Crozier has had a snarl to his game and isn't afraid to drop the gloves. Wasn't far behind Schmidt in penalty minutes last year with similar games played. He never really had played with a chip despite have been in the AHL and in the AHL despite playoffs the prior year. It may be an unpopular opinion, but I don't feel Geeky has earned the spot over some of the others. He goes on to mention Boris, she said Charles, and Stahoviak. I just haven't been impressed with his game so far.
So I was basing my kind of take on Crozier on what I had seen from him at the NHL level. So Bolts fan Syracuse has seen Crozier play a lot more than I have. I guess I could have looked at the penalty minutes, but sometimes that can be a little misleading in terms of like how you are playing while the game is going on. Maybe you just are the sort of player that gets into fights, right?
Sure.
And usually that does also equate to having a snarl to your game. But I was impressed with how Crozier was taking the body, and that to me looked like an element of his game that I hadn't noticed quite as much earlier. So I will still maintain that I think Geeky is going to be in the opening night roster. I will add, as I have mentioned many times, Greg, I'm not the general manager. So I don't know what Julian and his staff are thinking about, like, where these players are in the pecking order. Is it possible that he does not start the season on the NHL roster? Of course it's possible. He himself has said, I feel like I need to earn a spot, which is what you want to hear. He also does not have to clear waivers, which goes back to a point that you were making on yesterday's show, which could be a factor in who stays and who goes down. I thought he had a pretty good game in the first game at Carolina. He was involved in a couple of goals. Remember Giovanni Smith, need him. He went out. Like, he had engagement in that game. I'm not sure he was as impactful in the second game. And in fact, he started that game on a line with Cirelli and Hagel and did not finish the game on that line. They moved Gonsalves to that line. Read into that what you will. That was also a game in which the Lightning were kind of up against it in the second period, so it may have been game flow related and less, specific to one player. But the last thing I'll mention, and the fans can take this for what it is worth, which may not be worth very much at all. At practice yesterday, they had kind of the one sheet with the main group and then another sheet with kind of the rest. And on the main group, Geeky was on the fourth line, which, he hadn't really been on that line before. He'd kind of been with Gordon Bjorkstrand. They had Chafee with Gordon Bjorkstrand. So, again, read into that what you will.
Yeah.
Part of me is like, it doesn't even really make sense for him to mention that, because what's going to determine who stays and who goes is less about kind of where they are in the lines and in a practice and more about what happens in the preseason. But we'll see. If management shares Bolts fan Syracuse's opinion, then yes, they have the option of having him start in the minors. I still think that is more unlikely. I think he's going to start in the NHL.
I think where he starts in the NHL is the bigger question. And I think what role does he play on this team at the NHL level is an interesting one, because you will hear from people like a Phil Esposito, who is one of the greatest goal scorers of all time, one of the greatest players of all time, is that when you get a guy who is a first-round pick and is a skilled player, and, Geeky is, those guys need to be put in that position. That playing them in a role that doesn't suit their skill sets can sometimes hurt their development. I think that goes in a lot of ways because this league has been littered with players who were former first-round picks that end up being third and fourth-line players. Gergensen's being one of them, correct? Yeah. I mean, that's just one example I gave you. I can give you some other examples over the years where, and I think it's because the team is top-heavy, they don't necessarily have depth, so you take a skilled player who probably isn't more of a third or fourth line player, and you put him there because you don't have room in their top six. I always give you the example of the Penguins in the mid-'90s when Lemieux was still playing. A guy like Alexei Morozov who came up, who was a former first-round pick, had a ton of skill, but you weren't going to bench Kovalev and Straka and Jágr. So what did end up happening to him? Goes on a fourth line. He's playing 8 minutes. He's scoring 10 goals a year, and it hurt his development. And again, that's one example over the course of 20 years where that does happen. For Geeky, what makes him a little more unique is the other aspects of his game. He's not just a skilled player. He's big. He's physical. And the Lightning don't have a ton of players like him. So I maybe will meet with you halfway. I don't know if Geeky is a top 6 guy at this moment for the Tampa Bay Lightning, particularly with who they have coming back and where things are constructed right now and his play so far. But I don't think putting him on a fourth line also makes a lot of sense. And if you want to say, look, I think having him on a third line in some capacity, and that could be with Nick Paul and somebody else, I could say I can live with that because he's still going to see some pretty good minutes. It's not just the dump and chase line where you're just checking and hoping the other team doesn't score. That's going to be part of it. You're going to look to that line or for that line to push back offensively because in today's NHL, Dave, you need that. But I also realize I'm not sure he's knocking anybody off in the top 6 at this moment.
No, I would agree with that.
And I think that's a fair assessment.
But, I mean, he did play with Hagel and Cirelli at the start of last year.
He did.
And, I mean, these things are fluid with John Cooper.
It's absolutely fluid. And if he got that opportunity, I don't think you and I would sit here and say, yeah, I don't want to see that. I mean, eventually, I think the pedigree, the skill set, if it all clicks, Geeky's a top 6 forward. That doesn't always happen, though.
And if the Lightning keep... So your point is a good one. If he's on the NHL roster and he's in the lineup, there is a chance that he may not start in the top 6 and Coop moves him onto the top 6, or vice versa, which is what happened in the game on Saturday against Nashville, where he started in the top 6 and didn't finish in the top 6. What Bolts fan Syracuse is suggesting, don't mean to put words in her mouth, but, kind of like, I don't think he makes the NHL roster. Just keep in mind that without Nick Paul, and you are keeping, I presume, 14 forwards, what you are then saying is Connor Geeky is 16th or lower on this list, including Nick Paul. Okay? And I'm not sure there are that many players that are in the mix that have elevated above him, basically.
Yeah.
At this point. But is it possible he makes the NHL roster and sits, at least at the beginning of the season? It's certainly possible. If they're going to keep 14 forwards, 2 are going to sit.
Yep.
And have to wait their turn and earn a spot. Or somebody gets hurt and they slot in.
Yeah. Competition. So that's the other thing. Did she have
something else in there? I think she said she liked Kachuk, right?
Yeah.
Which
she mentioned
he's
Charles.
Had a very good camp. Charles? Is that who she Does she mean James?
Let me see. She had a two-parter on her
Good,
tweet.
Strong English names, Charles and James.
Yeah, she said it may be unpopular opinion, but I don't feel Geeky's earned a spot over some of the others, and she has in parentheses Charles, Boris, and Stahoviak.
All right, I'm not sure. So the Lightning also have Charles-Edouard Destoux, who we didn't talk about. He was sent to Syracuse. I actually never seen this
God
guy
bless
play
you.
before. I guess. You definitely need to brush up your French accent when Destoux is in the lineup.
He looked good, right?
He looked good.
Yeah, he looked
the
good.
Lightning had a very good first period on Saturday
Yeah.
against Nashville, and I thought Destoux was part of that.
Yeah.
As they had their play dip a little bit in the second, especially, like, he was less noticeable because the Lightning didn't have the puck as much.
Yeah.
I think Syracuse is going to be pretty happy with this guy based
could
on what I
skate.
saw. He's another guy who's
like he could
over in
skate.
Europe
Yeah,
the
he
last
was.
couple of years.
Yeah. That's an interesting route. I don't – it's a copycat league. I think we've seen NHL teams dip into the European pool when they can for talent. But I think especially teams that aren't drafting as well or don't have as many draft picks, that is one way to kind of fill that void, is to see if you can find maybe somebody who's 25, 26 and is willing to come over here and say, let me see if I can make it to the NHL. You know, there's nothing wrong with that. So I think that's interesting. My neighbor Lucas says, during one of the practice clips the Lightning posted, all the players commented on the chemistry Girgensons and Holmberg already have, and Mac even called them inseparable, hoping they're able to unlock a new strong bottom six-line combo.
Well, clearly that occurred before Holmberg got dinged up. Which
Well,
would
he
have been in the early days of camp.
And he tweeted that, Lucas did, yesterday.
Okay.
Just to be fair and give some more
Yeah,
context.
I mean, I think that based on how they were running, and again, I just kind of poo-pooed this as a bellwether, but I mean, the beginning part of camp, you had a fourth line of Holmberg, Girgensons, and Chaffee. So they were playing together, meaning the two guys Lucas referenced. Holmberg and Girgensons were playing together a lot.
Yeah. It's a shame we haven't seen Holmberg. I mean, we've seen him over the years if you've been really following the NHL, but I think people want to see how that chemistry plays out in a game. I mean, it's one thing to do it in practice. In a game, I think you want to get it. And look, I think the coaching staff wants to see that too.
And Coop, when he met with the media yesterday, made it sound like both Holmberg and Hedman were not going to be, first of all, they weren't going to be long-term, and he kind of put it a little awkwardly. He said it's not a threat that they would miss the rest of the preseason. So take that for what it's worth. We'll see Thursday or Saturday if Pontus is able to make his Lightning preseason debut.
What other questions? This was, I'm just reading some of our emails that we got. This was from yesterday. The second part of Boomer's question at Bolts Breakdown. He said, you talked about yesterday about how it would surprise you if Schmidt made the team and Carlisle didn't. What are some things that stand out to you about Carlisle? What do you like about him? Last week of training camp is upon us. Last week may have been more about seeing our youth. What is this week about?
Well, tonight, Coop talked about reps, but tonight a lot of the top-end guys are not playing for the Lightning. So it's going to be about
old-time hockey, eh?
You have a smaller group. So you don't have like 55 guys to try and figure out different practice times. And, not all the coaches are on the ice at the same time. Jeff Halpern might be running a practice in this group and Rob Zettler might be running a practice in a different group. You're just getting to a more manageable number and you're settling into the group that is going to start the season at the NHL level, and presumably those line combinations and D pair will get touches together, in addition to getting maybe one or both of these final couple of games after tonight. I like Carlisle. I've liked Carlisle every time he's come up. He got a game 2 years ago. He got 3 games last year. He scored that very memorable goal right at the end of the game in Seattle, which is a great moment for him. I think that he's a smart player. I think he's solid. I think he's reliable. Right now, though, he is just, I will frame it this way. He is 8th. And I don't know if the Lightning are going to keep 8 defensemen. Now, if there's an injury, particularly if it's an injury to a left-handed defenseman, I'm not going to say Hedman because it sounds like Hedman's going to be back before, training camp is up. I would expect that Carlisle is going to be the first guy to fill that spot. Boomer was talking about the difference between, or maybe just talk about Carlisle, but Carlisle's a lefty and Roman Schmidt's a righty. So, I mean, that's a pretty significant difference in terms of kind of how they would slot in and how they would be used.
I think, and this is an interesting one, but to go back to Boomer's point about Carlisle, I mean, I've been impressed with him. I like him. I think one of the things we have talked about, the Lightning do have a nice collection of young defensemen here who is going to show, I think, pretty well. And let's not forget, I think sometimes we do, is there another level to a guy like Darren Radish's game? I don't know. But it feels like if you're going to make a move, if you're him in your game, in your career, now might be this year where we see it really come together for him as somebody who, he's a little bit of a veteran now on that team. He's played over 150 games. He's somebody that I think has a really good shot, we know, but should feel comfortable now in the system and with the players that maybe you see another level of his game partner that we haven't seen before, which could be very beneficial, to the Lightning. And we talk about this competition. He's one of those guys that can look over his shoulder a little bit and say, okay, you know what? If I don't play well, I'm not a guarantee to be in the lineup either.
He experienced that last year.
He did.
Not a lot, but I mean, enough that I'm sure he remembered.
I do. And Perbix is gone. So, Radish is looking at this like, okay, maybe an opportunity here, but also I got to do something with that opportunity. And I think that will be kind of fun to experience. Jim from Jacksonville, he sent this over 3 days ago, partner. He said, I'm hoping Vasi will be okay to start the year. Lots of back-to-back games to start the season. He gets into them. It's really critical that the Lightning start the year by earning at least 12-plus points in their first 10-game segment. So he's already pulling that math.
If you fall behind in the first 10-game segment, that means you have to make up that ground. I agree there are back-to-backs in there. I did not look at the October schedule, though, Jim, honestly, and think, this is going to be a really heavy lift. I think the two parts of the schedule that, to me, look like the toughest, just based on travel and games, frequency of travel. They have that January stretch for much of January. And like last year, when they played the 14 games in 24 days and all these time zones, it started with a California trip right at the beginning of the new calendar year. Again, they are going to California. I think they play Anaheim on New Year's Eve, but then it bleeds into the beginning of January, and then they come home for one or two, the fans would know, and then it's a 5-game road trip. And then I think they come home for a brief game or two, and then they have another road trip. So that stretch in January leading up to both the Stadium Series game and then the Olympic break is going to be a heavy lift. Now, once they finish that busy stretch in January, I think it's 5 straight at home, including the Stadium Series game, then the Olympic break. So it turns into a 6-game homestand because they come out of the Olympic break playing Toronto at home.
Right.
But coming out of the Olympic break, and I know you and I talked about this in an earlier show, that is a very difficult stretch coming out of the Olympic break that they have. They have a lot of road games and a lot of games bunched together. I don't think it's 14 and 24 days or whatever, but it's like 9 of 14 on the road or something like that, where that one last year was 10 of 14 on the road. It's something similar. So, Jim, look, you're right. Back-to-backs are important. You have to be able to do well in them. Their first back-to-back, I will say, is an afternoon game in Boston and a night game in Washington. So that was not quite as tough in that, you're not getting in the middle of the night. But I'm presuming that Washington will be a rested team, and they're a good team. So that is a challenge. You need to be able to do well in back-to-backs. But I didn't look at the October schedule where the Lightning start at home. They have that 4-game road trip with the 2 back-to-backs, and they're back home for a week and a half with practice time in there. And there's another back-to-back in there, a weird one, where they play back-to-back at home. You probably noticed that, Greg, because it's Saturday at 5 and Sunday at 5 in late October. So that one's not involving any travel or anything like that. But to Jim's point, like if you're going to do well in the regular season, you need to at least take care of enough business in the back-to-backs. And we know that the Lightning is a team based in Florida. Usually their back-to-backs are not home. That one at the end of October is a very unusual sequence. If we see it, it's usually in that stretch right after Christmas where they're playing back-to-back at home. Usually it's road.
Boomer also had this question. Can you walk us through who of the remaining 7 forwards are eligible to be sent to the AHL without clearing waivers, and who will have to clear? When is the deadline to reassign them to Syracuse without having to deal with waivers?
Well, there is no deadline. I mean, you could send a player down after the regular season begins. Players, if they have to clear waivers, they have to clear waivers. It doesn't matter whether it's preseason or regular season. You have to have your roster set before the start of the regular season, which is 2 days actually before the Lightning play their first game. So, I mean, the Monday night leading into the Tuesday of the opening games is when the rosters have to be set. You have to have 23 or less. Right. I think we ran down the guys that were waiver exempt on yesterday's show, but we corrected ourselves on Finley. He's a fourth-year pro. So Finley has to clear waivers. Yeah. Sabourin has cleared waivers. So once you clear, you're good for 30 days, basically. So they can send him back down.
Duke doesn't have to clear waivers,
Duke
correct?
does not have to clear waivers. Right. I mean, let me kind of look at the list. So
I'm
Dominic James would not have to clear waivers.
No.
Duke would not have to clear waivers. Geeky would not have to clear waivers if we're talking him. He's not one of the 7. Jacob Peltier would. Abruzzese would. Kachuk would. I'm looking at tonight's game roster, not the full assortment of players on the roster. Stahoviak, I have to confess, I'm not entirely certain. I read something that I think Eric had out there that he did not have to clear waivers, but I don't know how it works. And this is my own ignorance for a guy who's played in Europe. He's 26. So usually if you're 26 and you've been a pro player for X number of years, you do have to clear waivers. I don't know if his situation is a little different. That's one I don't know. But the others, if they're in their first couple of years pro, they do not have to clear waivers.
I think let's give a bold prediction here, because sometimes the audience, appreciates some of these guesses, and that's what it is. You mentioned the Finley. I think he's probably the most fascinating out of all of this, because if he has to clear waivers, I don't know if he would go unclaimed. I don't know. I've given reasons why I think that's the case. You brought up a really good point, partner, about, look, if you have to send somebody through waivers that you don't want to and are afraid that they may get claimed, if you're going to do it, now might be the time, at the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
When a lot of these things are happening.
It's not just you sending down a bunch of players and other teams are trying to whittle down the roster. Like, there may be 30 names on the waiver list.
That's true.
Right?
That's true.
So this guy might be attractive. Maybe another guy is more attractive, as opposed to sending somebody down in November where they're the only guy on waivers. The other 31 teams are like, right, who's on waivers today? Oh, this guy. And let's take a flyer on him.
And I don't know the type of player you're sending down is going to be a blue chip at the beginning. If that makes sense, because typically if it's a high-end prospect, at that point, they probably still have to, they still can go to the AHL without having to clear waivers. If it's a blue chip prospect,
or
they're with the NHL team.
Waiver exempt, and if they are no longer waiver exempt, they're probably not a blue chip prospect anymore.
Right, or they're with the NHL team, and so you're not worried about it. Like they're making the team. So the type of player you're getting, that's why Jack Finley probably is so attractive, because it's a younger player. He's got a higher floor, but maybe a lower ceiling than your blue chippers. But there's a role for him at the NHL level, because you're not asking him to play top 6 minutes. Mm-hmm. Young guy, big size, wins faceoffs, and cost control for several years. Not bad. Not bad. And so if I'm a team, and I'm giving you an example. If I'm a team who hasn't been to the playoffs or is rebuilding and has the capacity to take on a young player who I think I can fit in to my system, and name several of those, you can. He's a player I would take a flyer on. He just would.
Yeah.
So and look, Julian can have all the conversations he wants with other GMs, I'm sure. Maybe he has an idea, the feeling around Jack Finley as a player around the hockey circles, but he's not going to know. Nobody's going to tell him,
Yeah.
So for me, out of all of these
There's
guys,
not a GM out there who's telling Julian, hey, if you put this guy in waivers,
put Finley on, I'm going to take him. But I don't know how you feel about this. Everybody else, there's more uncertainty. Like Dominic James, he's looked, to your point, dynamic.
Yeah,
but there's just not enough evidence.
Well, first of all, he would be waiver exempt. But even if he weren't, like somehow he was not waiver exempt,
right?
I'm not sure an NHL team would be like, yeah, we're allocating one of our open spots for this guy.
That's not going to happen. And some of those veteran minor leaguers, they are what they are. They're going down to Syracuse in this instance. Boris Kachuk, I think, is in that mode. Everybody last year had an opportunity to bring him in too, and he spent all of his minor league at Wilkes-Barre, and Pittsburgh wasn't a very good team last year. And I'm not saying he can't be a good NHLer. I'm just saying to start, Finley is the guy I think you keep an eye on out of all of this. And I think he starts the season with Tampa Bay outlining what I just gave you. The one X factor is if he bombs the remaining games. Like if he just doesn't look good and you're like, man, getting closer to the NHL season, we're playing more against NHL players. He doesn't look impactful. Because other teams
had a good camp, though. I mean, I think that they kind of were looking for him to make a good impression, and he has made a good impression. So you want to say as the inside track, you want to say that because the Lightning are keeping more forwards than they have in years past based on their, cap maneuverability. That means he has even more of an inside track, and the reasons you gave that you might lose this guy. I don't know how much that ultimately moves the needle with Lightning management, but
which part?
The waiver part, but it does move. Like the needle is moving. Like it's not immaterial. I just don't know how important that is when picking, between two guys.
So for Dylan,
I know you feel it's very important. Well, I think it has some significance. I'm not sure if it's like the be all end all.
For Dylan,
because we've seen guys they've put through waivers because they're like, we're not keeping you, so we're going to try and send you to the minors,
and that's fair.
Yeah,
like for Dylan Duke, I don't, and this is fine with his development. I don't think, I think he's a player that to me that's a no brainer. He probably gets sent down. I don't know if he has stood out more so than the other six we've talked about. Mm-hmm. And two, you don't have to rush that.
No.
You can still
send him. But he's
getting
a chance, at least tonight. He's getting at least one more game.
He's getting a chance.
To make, an impression.
By the way, Ben Pierce via X, Vasi on the ice today for practice.
Yeah.
So we just wanted to, and we are taping this. News. So it is good news. I actually think Peltier and Finley are the two. The more we're talking about this, are the ones that I think have the inside track to make the team out of camp. Some of that is play. Maybe a lot of it is play. And some of it is the waiver.
So let me say this about Peltier. I think he has proven that he can play in the NHL. Yes. What is his role going to be in the NHL, though? And that remains to be seen. If you put Jacob Peltier on waivers and a team claims Peltier, not only are they saying we want Peltier now because we're going to keep him in the NHL, you're taking a 3-year contract. You're taking a 3-year contract, and you are taking a 3-year contract that is one-way money in years 2 and 3.
I was going to say the first year is 2-way, correct?
It is 2-way, but it is more than just like taking a flyer on a guy. Now, look, you can then subsequently send him, if you don't want to keep him in the NHL, you can send him to the minors, but you are taking on the commitment of the contract, which many of these other guys don't have that same level of commitment.
Good point.
So,
and you may say a team might not want to stomach that.
That's what I'm saying.
Or maybe they find that attractive. I mean, that's the other thing.
They
like,
really want the player. So Peltier, once he was not qualified, he became a free agent. And I read an article where, he's staying with Yanni Gourde. Like, he's like, if the Lightning come calling, I want to go there. He earned that right? Once they didn't qualify him, the Flyers, he became a UFA, unrestricted.
Yeah.
He could go anywhere he wanted. He wanted to come to the Lightning. There may have been another team out there that was interested in him. So I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying that it's more than just taking the player for October of 2025. Yeah. You're taking on a 3-year contract. Some teams may not, to use your term, have the stomach for that, even if they like the player.
That's fair. That's a fair point. We're trying to bring everybody a reasonable point. Also from Ben on X, Holmberg taking the ice today. He's in a red no-contact jersey. Dominic James is also in a red jersey.
So that might explain why James is not in the lineup tonight and why Sabourin was called up. I mean, I think Sabourin was also called up because of the penalty minute component that we talked about. Probably doesn't hurt to have a guy like that.
Are you saying, partner, we may say over under 3 fights?
But they sent him through waivers on Sunday, Sabourin. Yeah, so, I mean, they could have not sent him through waivers. They could have kept him knowing that they had this game coming up. So I think something made them change course, and, seeing James in a red no-contact jersey gives us an answer. But they also could have sent James down, understanding that he was dinged up a little bit, as they did with Milo Rollins and Connor Kurth, 2 guys who were in camp who, were recovering from injury, but they were sent to Syracuse. So I hope whatever is bothering James, that we get to see him again in the preseason.
Especially these last 2 games, if that's possible. Yeah. Because I think he's earned the opportunity to give himself that chance of really being a dark horse coming out of nowhere. I mean, it's a really cool story from that perspective. But over under how many fights we see tonight? 3?
I don't know. I mean, sometimes you're
not
expecting a lot and it gets really ugly, and other times you're expecting ugliness and it doesn't happen. So I will say this. I mean, the Lightning have played this game in Orlando. I mean, it has to be at least 5 or 6 times going back. I remember the days of like Matthias Oland was, that was his, I think famously his last game. Like he left the ice in Orlando and that was his final game. He was dealing with a lot of injury problems. That would have been maybe 2011.
I was going to say,
so the Lightning were playing in Orlando back then. It wasn't every year up until more recently, but it's probably, Steve would know, it's probably been the post-COVID year notwithstanding. I think it's probably been like 6 of the last 7 or something like that. And I will say this, like the crowd is energetic. The building is close to, if not completely full. And it's a spirited atmosphere. And then there have been games where, like Steve mentioned, Bennett,
and
I'll just say, got involved with Vasvilevskiy. I don't know that he ran Vasvilevskiy, but he definitely got involved with Vasvilevskiy.
Right.
And, there was a game like that where there were a lot of fights.
What did Steve say? Over 14,000 fans?
Yeah, it was a great crowd last year. And that was that wild
really
game where Geekie scored in the last few seconds.
Yes.
I'm not sure the goaltending.
I feel like it was a soft goal. He went end to end. I think it was a pretty.
Well,
that
wasn't the only
right?
one, though. I mean, I think goaltending on both sides struggled a little bit. But
I remember the biggest game. I just remember Matthew Joseph had a big game, and that was the year he made the team out of camp. I think he played It felt like he played every preseason game that year, and I think he had a pretty good game in Orlando, and that stood out. And so those games can mean something for a lot of people. But I would anticipate tonight has a little bit of that old school hockey flavor.
Maybe.
And we'll see how it I think the only question is, does it happen right at the beginning of the game to set the tone? Because you got some guys who are wanting to make an impression. Or does it happen more organically as the game progresses? But I think it'll be fun. Our coverage begins at 6:30. We'll have a lot of interaction like we've typically done. So that part will be fun, talking about the game, because I think a lot of these points we're bringing up today, and again, we are taping, are ones that Lightning fans have, but the team internally is going through right now. And I don't know if they're looking at anything from a metric standpoint, partner, that we're not, or that's going to turn the tide a little bit more. I think this is purely what are we seeing with the eye test and how things are playing out. And I think Finley and his contributions, there's probably a little bit more under the hood that the coaching staff is looking at in terms of what he can do compared to like Dominic James, who's a pretty, as we said, dynamic player offensively. Finley, for him, because of the face-offs, is intriguing. I am intrigued about the face-offs in preseason compared to how does that translate to the regular season.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Do you want to buy that?
Did you notice when Nashville was late in the game and pulled the goalie and O'Reilly was taking draws?
Yes.
O'Reilly was winning like all.
Yeah, I know.
So
that's what I mean. Like,
in the offensive zone, he was like, "All right, it's on now." And I mean, he's a terrific.
He's an elite
Ryan O'Reilly. I'm talking
Ryan
about.
O'Reilly,
But yeah,
right.
he is a very, very good face-off percentage guy. And I mean, it wasn't only Finley. I think there were other guys out there too. But to your point, the veterans are like, all right, now it's time for me to dig in and win a key draw. There is something appealing, though, about the notion of having a right-handed centerman available to take face-offs in the defensive zone. I don't know if Finley is at the point where the Lightning feel they can, and I use this term, trust him in that he's just based on where he is in his career, reliable enough for them to like say, all right, you're the guy.
That's actually a really impactful point. Because if your role is, well, we like his size, but he wins faceoffs, and your faceoffs against the NHLers.
Glendening certainly have a role.
Well,
I mean, he did other things for the Lightning, but he had a very valuable, and still does, skill set.
Yeah.
Taking face-offs to the right of the goalie. Penalty kill, 5-on-6.
No matter what.
Yeah.
He was going to be out there. And so if Finley, if we said if he makes the team, my sense is he's not in the top 12. So you're not relying on him per se. But if he does get in, and part of what you like about Finley is that he can win faceoffs, and it's really close in terms of who's going to make the team from those 7 prospects we just talked about. And you break down Finley even more and say, okay, against guys who don't have a ton of NHL experience compared to guys who are basically on his level, there's a drastic difference. That may factor into the decision because you're going against NHLers.
Yeah.
So probably something to keep an eye on if you are going to start really, again, looking under the hood a little bit to see what's really going on here. So I think a fair point. And I think it's something that we're going to probably follow from now until, the remaining preseason game ends. All right, game's at 7, correct? Which means we'll be on the airwaves at 6:30. You're doing the game by yourself, is that right?
As far
old
as
school?
I know.
Somebody may join you. We don't know.
Who knows who's going to end up in the seat next to me?
Yeah, I mean.
Is my hope that the length of the game... Okay, I'm going sold tonight. That's fine. Although I'll have Steve and Jared there alongside me.
Yeah, they'll talk to you.
Moral support.
Yeah.
It is my hope, not just for me, but for Steve and everybody else who wants to make the trip, that the trip from Tampa to Orlando takes less time than the actual game itself.
Good point.
Which is not. I'm not hoping for a 3.5 hour game.
I'll make sure to wrap up post game. Yes, I'll make sure to wrap up. I'll talk.
Well,
as
it's
quickly
not
as
coming
possible.
home. Coming home is fine. It's getting there.
I know.
Another reason why we pre-tape.
When are you
we
leaving?
Need to allocate time.
1.
So I am probably going to have a power lunch, an actual power lunch.
Good for you.
As we speak right now, it's a little before noon. So I will eat and then probably go. And I would rather have to kill a little time at the Kia Center rather than be stuck in traffic.
I 100% agree with you. 100% agree with you. Well, drive safely.
Yes.
First and
and
foremost.
everybody else. If they're planning
everybody
on
out
making
there.
the trip.
Be safe. I-4 stuff. There's no doubt. We'll do this again tomorrow.
Yes.
We'll recap what we saw, and we'll take questions from our audience, but I will talk to you tonight.
Talk to you
Safe
tonight.
travels. All right, partner there. Thanks to Steve Versnick, Jared Johnson. Thanks to you for listening. We always appreciate you guys. You've been listening to Power Lunch on Lightning Radio.